One man, one Murloc, one giant angry badger. This is Blue Please. It begins now. Yes, indeed, folks, you're tuned into Blue Please here on WoW Radio with myself, Total Biscuit. Welcome to the show, and I must apologise, to start with, for missing last week's. I wasn't feeling very well. Sorry. Didn't want you to land you with a subpar show. It's not what we do here. This is Blue Please. We talk about WoW. This should not surprise you in any way, shape, or form. If you don't like WoW, get out of here now. Yow, yow, yow. Okay, so, hope there's been a patch. Always a good thing. So we shall see what we can do about content and that coming up later in the show. The nerf to raiding, a bridge too far, or simply a floodgate scenario? Plus, do casuals really need to stop crying? Seriously, you can't have everything. Plus, of course, our second wind at the end of it. We have been missing that one. Yes, I did just say...
Second wind!
Patch 2.1.0, the maker or the breaker. I'll be covering that a little bit later on in the show. Plus, Nubcake News, and, of course, one and only rap in the forums. For those who actually stick around to listen to that, dear God, I really don't know why you do. Never mind. So, I've got a lot of catch-up to do since I've managed to miss a week. 2.1.0, I am actually not going to cover in the first 15 minutes of this program. Yeah. I'm also not going to cover StarCraft. What the hell is StarCraft? StarCraft 2! Nothing to do with WoW, as excited as I may be to see a game that I will probably suck at, just like StarCraft. And it is shiny, and I do like the look of it. I'm not going to speak of it. So let's get on with WoW stuff. Now, a few weeks ago, you may remember, I was talking about MVPs. Now, MVPs, I had something of a negative view of, to be quite brutally honest. Now, you may have heard of one called Palehoof. Palehoof is an MVP on the US side. Palehoof wrote me a very, very long email. And I always like to expose people to as many different viewpoints as possible. For instance, when we were talking about GMs, we actually had a GM respond via email. So we got to see both sides. As let's face it, very difficult to see the wood for the trees half the time. You only do have a limited perspective on things. I only have a limited perspective on things. So if other people have perspectives and they send them in and they're valid and good to go, then that is fantastic. And we can say, hey, look, we're credible. or something. So, Mr. Palehoof. I'll pretty much spend this first section reading this email to you because it is very, very good indeed. It gives a very interesting perspective on MVPs in general. Something that you won't find anywhere else. So, thank you to Mr. Palehoof for being so candid and sending this one in. Let's get ready to go. Okay. Here we go. It says this. Thanks for your time. I listened to the MVP section of the April 29th again this morning. Noting a few things I want to respond to. I appreciate your willingness to discuss, and again, please don't feel I'm in any way offended or angry about anything you said on the show. I disagree with some of it, but as I often say when I'm typing in green, I don't think disagreeing makes either of us a better person. Or worse person, in fact. For your reference, I'll give you a little background on my gaming credentials. He's a 33-year-old married man who lives in a house on 5 acres of forest with my wife of 1 month. We've been dating 8 years. Congratulations there. My mum has no basement, so contrary to what you might have read, I don't live there. I began gaming in 1981 when my parents gave me the Dungeons & Dragons box set and a copy of the Monster Manual, signed on the inside, Merry Christmas, love Mummy and Daddy. So I was what one might call an early starter on my lifetime of nerdery. I played predominantly tabletop games, though I branched into computer games fairly early. Ultima 2 was the hot new game when I first started computer RPGs. I'll spare you the long list of games I played, suffice to say the usual settings. Now, in tells this section forums. I've always been an outspoken player in any game I've played. With online games, with a real community, as you describe in the show, I've participated in those games forums to much the degree I have in the World of Warcraft forums. And in each of these 3 online games I've spent any time in the community, I've found myself offered positions similar to MVP. World of Warcraft's forums are, of course, the largest scale forums I've ever participated in, but the position I fill there is very similar to those I filled in the past. I don't work here, but I can help you out. I should note that in all 3 cases this sort of thing is offered, not sought. Now, I started playing in December of 2004, rolling a Tauren Hunter on Kel'Thuzan PvP server. I am very much a player who will take his time through the game, reading quest texts, reading books I might find, and exploring. I'm also a casual player. As I often describe in the forums, I play about 2 or 3 hours a night, 2 or 3 nights a week. I usually get a 5 to 6 hour stretch in on the weekends, but I am not a raider or hardcore by any stretch of the word. More on that below. When Lightning Hook, the RP PvP realm, opened in November 2005, I re-rolled my Torrent Hunter there and started over. I've always been a role player. I like PvP for the risk, so I have no characters in any PvE server. That said, I prefer the RP to the PvP, so it really is for the risk, not for the sake of PvP itself. That's one of the few things in life at which I'm not very good, which I still enjoy participating in. That relates to raiding, and again, more on that below. Now, here's the meat of it. You may remember that in my MVP section, I didn't actually look too kindly on MVPs. Not necessarily MVPs themselves, but the entire program in general seemed, in my opinion, to hire, well, sycophantic people who would never really speak out against Blizzard and didn't really do an awful lot for the community. He's got a lot to say to that, so let's continue. I've been posting on the forums for the entire year prior to the MVP program being announced. I noticed that a lot of times that people ask questions at times when the staff are not available, and so I noted what the staff had answered in the past and relayed it. I was usually careful to specify I have read them saying this, or from what I've seen them say in the past, that sort of statement. If I could find the post, I would link to it, and if I couldn't, I would often admit, I can't find the post, I'm sorry, but this is what they have said. It didn't take me very long to notice that people were also asking questions when staff were around, which were getting ignored. And I noticed this is still an ever-present phenomenon to this day, that often the reason was that the staff had already given an answer in the first place, and they'd just plainly given up answering the question over and over again. A very real example of this very day, take a look at the US General Forum and look for a thread asking for new servers. I'm relatively certain you will find one. I'm relatively certain there will be no blue response. So, noting that, I started answering those as well. I'd say things they probably don't bother to tell people this anymore, and then give the answer they've already given. I also noticed something which I may be wrong on, but I still believe to this day. World of Warcraft is an engine designed to generate money. To Blizzard, any happiness or satisfaction we feel as a result of playing with that engine is desirable and rewarding, but it is also, at the literal bottom line, incidental. To Blizzard, the purpose of World of Warcraft is to give us a reason and excuse for giving Blizzard our money, for as long as possible. A lot of design decisions, as well as our objections to them, come down to that simple fact. This relates to MVPs being, as you put it, to some degree sycophantic, and I'll touch on that again below. I would often comment on the forums that Blizzard clearly does not care how we feel. Angry money is worth almost exactly the same as happy money, he says. In other words, I would regularly suggest to people who had ongoing problems which were not being addressed that they stop paying for the service until such time as the service is satisfactory. On almost every occasion, saying this in white text caused people to cheer me as a hero. Don't say that, Blizzard will ban you, or man, you call it like you see it, huh? I've since learned that saying so in green or light blue text is not always taken the same way. So I posted like that for a year. I helped those who I could, and I asked for help from those who could help me. I also passed that on to those who had the same question later. When I saw a flaw, I pointed it out. Specifically, my concentrations in the game are PvE, exploration, hunter class, engineering and mining, and secondary professions. I try to really only give advice in profession and hunter discussions. I feel, having played a hunter for 2.5 years, I have some experience to share. I'm careful to note, however, whenever I give advice on my class, what my playstyle and schedule are. I am also quick to remind people that what I am doing with my character may well not be the most mathematically effective thing to do. It may not be something that they would enjoy doing. It's just something I enjoy doing. Engineering, I tend to take a stronger stance. I really have concentrated on doing that, and I feel that with some notable exceptions, I'm one of the longest running engineers still playing the game and still bothering with the profession. After posting that way for a year, I was offered the MVP position, which brings us to the show. And here he goes. You mentioned some things Blizzard could and should do if they intend to use the forums as some sort of arena for getting feedback from customers. I'm not entirely confident that Blizzard intends the forums for that purpose. I'm sure it's handy for them having an instant response system to let them know exactly the range and depth to which the collective knee is jerking, but I don't think the forums are intended for that purpose primarily. It seems to me that the forums are most effective and most satisfying when they are approached by the players as a place to discuss with other players. It's when people start trying to make the forum a direct line to the developers that they start getting their feelings hurt. You mentioned that all MVPs are to some degree sycophantic in that they do defend Blizzard to the hilt. You also mentioned that MVPs come down on trolls. These two things are tied together quite tightly in my mind. You have to bear in mind that MVPs are not given the position because they are silent. They are not offered the title as a reward for never saying anything. And MVPs are players, not staff. In short, we are forum posters to no less degree than any troll. I would say to quite a greater degree than most, in fact. And these people are not our customers. They're just people who are talking trash on a forum. For my part, I don't mind talking a little trash back. If someone wants to scream about how stupid anyone is for playing Warcraft at all, I think they're certainly entitled to the reminder that their level 70 Blood Elf wearing Karazhan gear would indicate they're pretty stupid themselves. By their own definition, is it defending Blizzard? In many cases, it is. But in many cases, it's also just trolling a troll. The easiest retort one can ever make on the forums is, that thing you hate, you do it too. In almost every case, it's true. You mentioned someone who posted a green poster recommendation thread based on a poster who consistently defended Blizzard, and it's a legitimate point. That's not what an MVP should be based on. But I don't think it's fair that you take one poster's misperception of the program and subsequent recommendation and use it as an example of the qualification process. This comes back to the comments you made about constructive criticism. You're right, a lot of people just don't get it. And unfortunately that means when they see it, they often mistake it for bootlicking and a degree of sycophantism, as you mentioned. They can never point it out when asked. I've tried this. One called the liquor of a boot or a sucker of... Yeah, I'm not going to say that on air. Could you please quote the bootlicking, I ask them. Oh, you probably just deleted the thread, they respond. By which I mean, of course, that they can't find it and or will not bother to try. Also, MVPs can't delete threads, but the fact remains, those who cannot recognise criticism, which is constructive, will often see anything short of all capital profanity to be bootlicking. Saying ad infinitum that an MVP is a bootlicker based on their own faulty understanding of a post is easy and trendy. I have a good example pertaining to engineering. Someone asked if there were any reason to be an engineer at this point in time, given the second-rate treatment the profession has received, and since the Burning Crusade. My response was this, paraphrased. Being an engineer is really the only tangible benefit to being an engineer at this point. If you get into the profession for any other reason than being an engineer, you may well be disappointed. He says this, is that criticism? It's intended as such. Is it constructive? Not really. I don't suggest anything to fix the problem, but I do acknowledge the problem exists. Unfortunately, since I do not say how stupid Blizzard is, how retarded engineer is to still be one, and I don't think I used any curse words either, that post garnered me 6 pages of people coming down on me for defending Blizzard. What do you think that post meant? You say, I've never seen any MVP question any of Blizzard's design decisions, and you probably haven't. For my part, it doesn't happen very often. Mostly because, as you also say, players have a hard time seeing the game from anything other than their own limited perspective. Being a player, I'm as guilty of that as anyone, and I'm not a game designer, nor am I one to panic over things undone based on speculation of what they might be when they are done. I still recall the public test run of 1.4 when dodge applied to range attacks and a 60 hunter couldn't kill an AFK 56 rogue. I also recall quite vehemently asking how Blizzard could identify a bug on the PTR, identify a fix for it, and then be unable to correct it until after the patch. And as it happens, they didn't. So you're right, it doesn't happen often. I'm not surprised you haven't seen it, but it does happen and we don't get fired for it. You say that you don't think you've seen anyone rewarded for MVP who has ever been critical of Blizzard in the past. I regularly tell people that Blizzard does not care if they are happy, they only care if they are paying. I'm often told that this makes me a fanboy. Do you think the same? They don't care if we're happy, we're paying. The threat of I hate this so much that I'll continue to pay for it does not really inspire a great deal of action, I would think. And Blizzard's action or lack thereof bears this out. Is it critical of a company to observe that the purpose of their product is to divest as many people of their money as possible for as long as possible? Surely it's not on Blizzard's publicity release. You mentioned Anvilbeard's not even being level 60 when he was hired, and I was the same way. I was hired as an MVP at level 58. And I agree that there should be an MVP at least, probably more than one who is in a high-end raiding guild which is down pretty much everything. I can ask people to bear in mind what MVPs discuss though. Find a post by me advising someone on raiding. No, you can't do it. No such post has ever been made. Find a post by me asking a question about a raid though. More than one has been made. This is an important point about the way I use the program, which I'd like to point out. I am willing and able to admit that I don't know everything about the game. The simple fact is really not that common a character trait on the forums, you might agree. With that in mind, I'm not embarrassed to ask a question about a quest or a raid or an item. If I don't care that people think I'm noobish, perhaps someone will actually answer me. I've got an email from people via my MySpace which has thanked me for asking a question because they also needed the answer. Now, I'm going to skip past this just to one particular point. One thing always strikes me. It's amazing how quickly someone will jump on an MVP for literally no reason. Yesterday, the US service had some widespread outages and people on the forums were really quite upset about it. Rightly so. Lots of people were asking about compensation, 3 days and so on. I've seen this happen a lot and I know how Blizzard handles this sort of thing, so I posted on the general forum to explain. I listed 4 things to know about comp time. I explained that they only announce comp time after the problem is fixed, and then it's a couple of days later I explained how comp time is charged on your account, and I explained that the people making the announcement of comp time are not the people making the decision, nor the people fixing the problem. I explained that Terms of Use says that we might not be able to play at any time, and we agreed to this. The result was that thread ran into 8 pages of attacking me for saying so. Side results were 6 threads demanding I be fired, or just saying I suck, or saying /discuss. And for what? For answering a question which was being asked. Long email. And he's got one final thing to say. I don't take MVP, and I didn't take MVP to defend Blizzard, nor did I get offered it because I've done so. I took it and was offered it, because I like talking to people about this game. If telling unhappy people that they shouldn't pay to be unhappy makes me a fanboy, I accept that tag. For every fanboy, get off your knees post I say, there's always a post saying, thanks, Palehoof. That was just what I needed to do. I go home smiling each and every day. Now that is a very, very long email. I had to paraphrase that a little bit, so I'm going to post the whole thing on the WoW Radio forums. WCRadio.com, check out our forums page. That is a very long email from Palehoof, an MVP, explaining pretty much what he believes about the MVP program and the MVP position. Hopefully clearing up a few misconceptions. I'd like to thank Palehoof for emailing me that. Always like to show every side of the argument. You're listening to Blue Please here on WoW Radio with myself, Total Biscuit. Got some Fintroll coming up for you, so jigging is required. Macton Spearer. Enjoy.